All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. As the losses continue to be racked up by the New York Mets, it's almost as if each game is a rerun from the previous one. The Mets starting pitchers struggle to give their team 5 innings on the mound. The Mets offense hits home runs, but they're mainly of the solo variety. New York fails to hit with men on base. And last but not least, the Mets overused bullpen. And when you mix all of this into a pot, you'll see a team in the Mets that has not only surrendered the lead in the National League East to the Philadelphia Phillies, but they're also holding on to that final wild card position in the NL with spit and glue at the moment. We saw the Mets just last month win 7 in a row as they were looking like they were ready to get their sea legs for the second half of the season. But now, what we have seen from New York over the last 2 weeks has been putrid baseball, to say the least. The Mets have dropped 11 of their last 12, which includes losing a pair of one-run games this weekend versus the Milwaukee Brewers. At the end of the day, you could just sit back and pick your poison with the issues with this club at the moment. New York is 12th in the National League in batting average this season, 13th in hits, while they are one of the worst teams in baseball with men on base. Yes, the Mets are fourth in the National League in home runs, but the bulk of those have come when nobody is on base. Pitching wise, the Mets have the fourth best team ERA in the NL, but only the Colorado Rockies and Miami Marlins have fewer quality starts this season in the National League than New York currently does. And at this point of the season, you look at David Peterson as he is the only starter that the Mets can count on to consistently give them 6 innings when he takes the mound. I mean, you look at this rotation for or this pitching staff for what it's worth. Right now, David Peterson is the leader in innings pitched as he has thrown 133 innings for the year. And at this point of the season, it doesn't look like anybody from this Met starting rotation is even going to sniff getting close to 200 innings this season. When, of course, once upon a time, 200 innings was a guarantee for an entire pitching staff. Now, yes, the Mets have the highest payroll in baseball, but at the end of the day, this is a flawed team. Okay, the Mets have a top heavy squad in regards to their lineup. I mean, and at the end of the day, when the top of their lineup is not hitting like they currently are not right now, you'll see the results that the Mets currently have. I mean, you look at Francisco Lindor. He got off to that hot start this season. He's only hitting 243 right now. Juan Soto got off to a slow start, but he's still only hitting 251. Pete Alonso got off to a hot start. He's only batting 264. And for me, with all of the struggles that we have seen from this Mets lineup all season long, especially as of late, the $1 million question for me is why does Eric Chavez still have a job as this team's hitting coach? That's a big one right there. Because if you're talking about all of these talented bats in this lineup, and you look at where the Mets are stat wise in comparison to the rest of the National League, you look at the fact that this team is not hitting and has not hit all season long with ducks on the pond. You got to ask yourself, well, you know what? You can't fire the players, but somebody's got to pay for this ineptitude. Okay, that's just my 2 cents on it. You look at the Mets, and like I said, this is a flawed team. They went out there and they gave Juan Soto carte blanche because Steve Cohen, the Mets team owner, wanted to have a superstar in his lineup. I totally get it. Okay, but on the flip side, we have seen the Mets shop at the 99-cent store for their starting rotation. And brother, I'm here to tell you, it shows because Mets president of baseball operations, David Stearns, he has continued to roll the dice. And he's done this throughout his career. Okay. But he's continued to roll the dice in regards to the retreads that he wants to bring in for starting pitchers. And honestly, it appears that Stearns is coming up snake eyes this year. Last year, um, the Mets, they rolled the dice on some guys. They let Luis Severino walk. They weren't going to pay him the money that the A's paid him. Jose Quintana was out there for the longest time before Milwaukee's signed him. And of course, Jose Quintana has been a solid part of their rotation this year. Speaking of the Brewers, this year the Mets rolled the dice on Clay Holmes, a relief pitcher with the New York Yankees. He started off strong, but Clay Holmes looks like he's running out of gas in that rotation. And the bottom line is, well, there are some people who are going to say, well, maybe it's time to put Clay Holmes into the bullpen, but who are you going to put in the starting lineup? They were hoping that Frankie Montas, could give them something. Another former Brewer, and Frankie Montas at this point, you're lucky if he can give you 4 innings. And honestly, in those 4 innings, Montas, for the most part, is throwing batting practice. Sean Manaea, he can give you about 3 quality innings, and usually in the fourth or fifth inning, he runs into trouble. Same thing with Kodai Senga. And again, it just sounds like a broken record in regards to talking about the Mets' struggles with their rotation. And of course, if the Mets are going to struggle with their rotation like they are, as far as not being able to consistently go deep into games, it's going to continue to be a problem for their bullpen. Early on in the season, the Mets bullpen was lights out. Why? Because they had fresh arms. But if you're going out there every night and you're asking this bullpen to put up 4 or 5 innings of relief work, eventually those guys are going to run out of gas. And at this point, this is where I feel that this Mets bullpen is. The Mets, to me, I feel like offense, defense, you name it. They have become a real life version of the movie Groundhog's Day because it's basically the same thing every single day. And watching it, you could see it coming from a mile away. Okay. We saw the Mets recently on their homestand. They lost 5 out of 6 to the San Francisco Giants and Cleveland Guardians. Okay. And these were two teams that basically threw in the towel at the trade deadline. And of course, the Mets made that deal with the Giants. And of course, you're talking about some teams that are heading in opposite directions right now. Maybe the Mets should have been sellers as opposed to being buyers at the deadline. Maybe things would be looking a little bit different for them. Like I said last week on this platform, where is the sense of urgency for this New York Mets team? Where is the leadership from somebody in this clubhouse who's going to stand up and say, you know what? This is not going to happen on my watch. And at the end of the day, I said it before and I will say it again. The Mets lack leadership. Okay. This right here, with what we're seeing from the Mets at the moment, is shaping up to be an organizational failure from top to bottom. Okay. And I guarantee you, if this continues in Queens, somebody's going to have to walk the plank sooner rather than later. If the Mets fail to make the playoffs this year, I think you are going to see a big overhaul with this club, with this roster heading into next season. Because again, like I said, they spent money, yes, okay, but it's not like they spent money on a lineup and they got the 27 Yankees. No, they're paying Lindor, they're paying Soto, they're paying Pete Alonso. But a lot of those guys in the lineup, for the most part, they picked up, they're within their organization. They're developing them, or nonetheless, some guys have just not lived up to their end of the bargain. And you look at this pitching staff, and at the end of the day, the results are there. I look at this Mets team right now, they are reeling. I mean, this was a team that a couple of months ago had about a 5 or 6 game lead over the Philadelphia Phillies for first place in the National League East. Right now, the Mets are 5.5 back of Philadelphia, as day by day it's looking less and less like the Mets are going to be able to win this division. Okay, we still got close to 2 months of baseball. Anything can happen, but at the end of the day, the Phillies have gotten their sea legs, and the Phillies they've gotten healthy. Okay, and they look like a team that's ready to get on a roll and win this division, and possibly do some damage in October in the postseason. And with that said, Mets are only up 6 games on the Miami Marlins, who have been playing some better baseball at the moment. The Mets have now slipped, like I said, to the last wild card spot in the National League. Of course, that was a wild card position that they got last year. But of course, last year is last year, and this year is the present. And at the moment, the Mets are only up on the Cincinnati Reds by a game and a half for that last postseason spot in the National League. I think what has happened is that, you know what, a lot of people saw the Mets, and what they did over the second half of 2024. And of course, it carried over into the postseason. And of course, the Mets got on that run. And of course, the Mets clearly wanted to build off of that, which they did in the offseason, which they hoped they did by bringing in a guy like Juan Soto. But at the end of the day, I feel like the Mets are like in some cases just resting on their laurels and thinking that what happened last year is going to be able they're going to be able to repeat that. Not necessarily. I think I've said this before. It's gut check time for this team, and somebody has to step up for this team and take on some accountability. And we haven't seen that so far, especially over the last couple of months from the Mets. CJ, what's going on, my man? I know that you are a hardcore Braves fan. I know that the Braves are basically out of it, but I still think the Braves can play spoiler in this division, especially from the fact that they still play the Mets, and they got the Mets coming up. Matter of fact, this Tuesday in Queens. And even though that the Mets are on the right side of 500 this year, and the Braves are not, especially due to the injuries, the Braves have still continued to be a thorn in the side of the Metropolitans. But nonetheless, I think the biggest opponent right now for the Mets is the New York Mets because again, I can't say this enough. There is zero accountability on this team. If you are a starting pitcher and you know that your bullpen is struggling, you got to take it upon yourself to go out there and give the best performance that you could possibly get and say, hey, you know what? No matter what, I'm going to give my team at least 6 innings of work out there to try to save this bullpen. I'm going to try to go as deep into a game as possible. I want it to be a situation where my manager has to get in an argument with me to take me out of a game. Like I said, no accountability in this lineup. And like I said before, if this continues, there's going to be some wholesale changes with this team. I guarantee you, if the Mets fail to make the postseason, with the payroll that they have and the expectations that they have for this team, I guarantee you there's going to be changes. For Brian Snicker with Atlanta, possibly. I doubt it, CJ, given their injuries. But nonetheless, I could tell you one guy in the National League East from the managerial spot that could be out of work if his team does not make the postseason this year, and that's going to be Carlos Mendoza, because Mendoza was the talk of New York last year after coming over from the Yankees, and in his first year, he rallied the Mets, got them to the postseason. But you look at things right now and the way that they are since June 13th. Okay, only the Rockies and the Washington Nationals have a worse record in baseball than the Mets or Yankees. Okay, and we're talking about just 2 months ago, the Mets looked like they were ready to run away with this division. It's gone to polar opposites since then. Coming out of the break, it looked like the Mets were ready to get on a roll. And ever since, they swept San Francisco, they're actually worse than they were heading into the break. And now New York, they've got to find a way to get on track. Like I said, they got a day off tomorrow. They host the Braves for a 3-game set that begins at Citi Field on Tuesday. The Braves have been a thorn on the side of the Mets. And then on top of that, this coming weekend, the Mets take on the Seattle Mariners. And the Mariners team has been playing some good baseball as of late. And of course, they're nipping on the heels of the Houston Astros in the American League West. So at some point, it's got to be put up or shut up time for the New York Mets. I don't know what that point is going to be. And to quote, a former NFL coach in Bill Parcells, you are what you are. And right now, the Mets are not a good baseball team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So let's see if they can get their act together. From what I've seen so far, I'm not optimistic. At some point, the losing streak has to end. The futility has to end uh, if you're the Mets. Uh, and I feel like like the team is just waiting for somebody else to go out there and make that move, or like as far as things go on the field. But again, somebody's got to stand up and take the bull by the horns by this thing. And again, I simply do not see the leadership with this team. For the Mets, what can I say? It's one of those where earlier this year we heard from their team owner, Steve Cohen. He wanted the Mets to come out there, the fans to come out there and support this team. And they've done it, but the team has not given the fans something to get behind and something to support them with. You know, baseball is a funny game from the standpoint that things could be going right one moment, and then with the flick of a switch, you know, things could turn around, and it goes the opposite way as well. So maybe the Mets can finally find a break and get over the hump for their sake. But like I said, if this continues, okay, and especially this week for the Mets, they've got three with the Braves and they've got three with the Mariners at home. If this trend continues, the Bluebirds are going to come out in Flushing. And on top of that, something has to give this team a spark. Last year it was Jose Iglesias and the OMGs and Francisco Lindor, you name it. But at this point, maybe shaking up Mendoza's coaching staff might, I mean, because again, you cannot fire the players, but just something for this team to get behind and light a fire under them. But it hasn't been the case so far. But nonetheless, the Mets are struggling. At some point, somebody within that clubhouse has to look in the mirror and say it's not going to happen on our watch. Will that point come soon? I'm not sure. But nonetheless, the Mets are slipping. They're struggling. And there appears to be no end in sight for the Blue and Orange. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. CJ, as always, definitely good to hear from you. And like I said before, let's see this weekend, or this week rather, if your Braves can play spoiler against the Mets and just add to their misery. On Tuesday night at Citi Field is Spencer Strider against Clay Holmes, David Peterson against Carlos Carrasco, and then Bryce Elder against Kodai Senga on Thursday night. So let's see what happens from there. Also, folks, if you are on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports. And if you give me that follow, I will give you that follow right back in return. Also, the same goes for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.